God gave us this amazing place and made our lives possible. And what we are doing to it is a sin.
Mother Nature's wrath has us on full alert. Hurricanes, earthquakes, floods. What are the world's scientific experts saying? I'm Lorna Duick, and this is Context.
Hurricanes don't happen because of climate change, they just happen naturally. But in a warmer world, there's more energy available to those hurricanes from the warm ocean waters to ratchet up to category 3, 4, or even 5.
And on the heels of the American government declaring climate change is becoming a threat, we hear from a leading climate scientist. For that, Katharine Hayhoe is on the program.
I realized that we are actually changing some of the fundamental chemical properties of the global ocean.
The international best-selling book Seasick, The Global Ocean in Crisis, is now a stage play. The science journalist behind it, Alana Mitchell, joins us from the road to talk about our oceans.
She has no electricity, no running water, and she's only seen the government 2 days ago, and that was just for the tarp, so no other help in this whole month.
Struggling to survive, Puerto Rico is still picking up the pieces. How does God move in with the wreckage? Cheryl Weber is on the ground to find out.
That we are still debating and still questioning whether life was a divine intervention.
Coming up on my snapshot, when the Governor General starts a storm of her own on faith and science. It's easy to forget about the storms after they pass, but so much agony exists in that aftermath. Thousands still displaced. We get an update from a FEMA representative in Miami.
It's horrific. I mean, you just don't expect anything like this to happen anywhere, and then it happens in a small community like this.
Bullets rain down on a sacred place of worship in Sutherland, Texas. 26 lives lost as they gathered in church on Sunday. We have insight from a former staffer at Sutherland, who's now an expert on American evangelical life and gun culture. We start with the shooting tragedy impacting Sutherland, Texas. 26 dead in a state where both guns and God are revered. We're joined by Christian educator Ed Stetzer. Ed, you know the Southern Baptist family, as we call churches families. What moves in on this grieving church community now?
Well, the Southern Baptist Convention of Texas is the local body that church is connected with. There's also even a more local body called an association, the National Convention as well. And I can tell you, I've talked to people at all three of those levels or partnerships, and all are engaged. I talked to a pastor. They've rallied the churches in the area association, not just in that denomination, but across different denominational families and traditions. This is the body of Christ. We're all grieving together. And probably many people have seen the video of the church the week before, and you saw, 50 people gathered. And then to know what happened afterwards, we cry out to Jesus. We say, why? And then we cry to Jesus and we say, help us. And then we get to help. And I think ultimately that's what Christians are doing right now in Sutherland Springs.
So how will it logistically work? Who does the funerals when there's 26 in a community of 50 in that church?
Well, I talked to one of the pastors there locally, and what he said to me is that we're all now in the process of sort of, he didn't use the word divvying, but kind of saying, or you'll do this, I'll do this, and I mean that's the horrible part. I mean, the horrible conversation that we're having here is planning this many funerals for this many people. So the pastor I talked to was Pastor Kevin Cornelius, and he just said that everybody's here. He said this wonderful thing. He said to me that I wrote about it in that article on CNN I published yesterday. The church still works. We don't have a plan, but we have a community. We don't have all the answers, but we have grace and peace. We don't understand, but we're still present. Our hearts are breaking, but we have hope, and we're giving it away as quick as we can. And I think that's what churches are rallying around this church to do.
All right. Okay, now let's talk about how prepared are America's churches for the possibility of gun violence on a Sunday?
Well, and some are and some aren't. And this is a small church, and larger churches tend to be more prepared. So I'm the interim teaching pastor of a church here in Chicago called the Moody Church, and we have a security ministry. We have volunteers. Some of them are off-duty police officers who actually are part of our security detail. But you get to a church of 50, it's a much difficult situation. And furthermore, I would say that when somebody comes in armored up with a semi-automatic weapon, like this is a modified version of AR-15. I mean, the reality is, I was talking to an FBI agent actually, and churches, he explained to me, are the perfect target. Everyone's facing forward, focusing on something other than themselves, and so I think the reality is there's things we can do. I'll publish an article at Christianity Today later today that talks about here's some ways we can improve security. But at the same time, I think we can't look back, second guess, and say, First Baptist Church had this, that this would not have happened. I just don't think we know the answer to that. And I think ultimately it's unhelpful to speculate, because when someone shows up armored with semi-automatic weapons, like an AR-15, a modified AR-15.
So if I can just interrupt here, what you're saying, though, it is normal now, especially in the largest churches in America, of which there are many, that there is a gun-packing security detail. That's normal now.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. Typically somebody who's connected to either off-duty law enforcement and then volunteers that work with that person or persons. Yeah.
Okay. Now, is it also normal that we're talking about gun control in churches? Is there any unity on that idea that America needs less guns?
No, there's actually not. Particularly for evangelicals, which would be much of your audience and mine. American evangelicals tend to be more conservative on the political spectrum, which puts them more in a Second Amendment supporter realm. And what they would say is that these guns were purchased illegally anyway, and so laws don't fix the problems. I think people are struggling with that because we're entering this new normal of mass shootings. But I would say most regular churchgoers, just statistically, I'm not saying every person, but statistically tend to be more pro-gun, pro-Second Amendment, they'd say here in our U.S. Constitution than anti. But maybe those things are changing. I just don't know.
Massive problem with sin, Ed, isn't it?
It is indeed. And the question I think for American Christians need to answer is, when sin is here and mental illness and brokenness and high power weapons are readily available, the situation can be much more serious, much more quickly. And I think that's what many American Christians are and need to wrestle with. It's very different to explain. My wife's Canadian, very different to explain people in other cultures and countries, but there's a very entrenched gun culture here in the U.S.
All right. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
That was Christian educator Ed Stetzer calling us from the Billy Graham Center in Wheaton. Scientists on both sides of the border gathered last week to examine climate change, and faith in God to care for our planet made unexpected headlines when Canada's Governor General mocked belief in God.
Can you believe that still today, in learned society and in houses of government, unfortunately, we're still debating and still questioning whether humans have a role in the earth warming up, or whether even the earth is warming up, period. That we are still debating and still questioning whether life was a divine intervention or whether it was coming out of a natural process, let alone, oh my goodness, lo and behold, random process.
Controversial comments from our newly minted Governor General. Well, for some insight, we go to Canadian award-winning science journalist Alana Mitchell. Hello, Alana.
Hi, how are you doing?
Great. Let's start with this. How do you understand the realm of God in scientific inquiry?
Well, for me, they're just two different spheres. Science is an assemblage of facts and provable things. It's based on evidence. And faith is a different sphere altogether. It's something that isn't proven, shouldn't be proven, is something that describes the mystery of life. But it seems to me that they can both live very comfortably within one spirit, one person, within one heart, in one individual.
You've wanted us to turn our attention, actually, to the science of our oceans. What is the alarm bell you're trying to sound?
Well, it turns out that the carbon load in the atmosphere is also affecting the ocean. And so it's turning the ocean what scientists call warm, breathless, and sour. So there's this chemical reaction that's happening right across the surface of the ocean down to more than a kilometer in depth that's changing the way the ocean is able to support life on the planet. And this is an incredibly serious problem that scientists have been tracking over the last 20 years, but really have gotten to grips with over the last 5 or 6.
And what's it going to mean for us when down to a kilometer you're seeing these changes in our water issues?
Yeah, well, the problem is that it affects all these creatures that live in the ocean, and they are in turn the ones that we depend on for life. One of the scientists put it to me this way, that if everything on land were to die tomorrow, everything in the ocean would be fine, maybe better. But if everything in the ocean were to die tomorrow, everything on land would die as well. And so that's the conundrum. If life in the ocean begins to perish, what happens to life on the planet as a whole?
All right. So what's the recovery plan? What do we need to do to be less seasick?
This is such a great question. And, there are, of course, technological answers to trying to put out less carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which is the goal. But, for me, in fact, it's also a cultural and psychological issue for citizens of our world. And so that's the thing that I've been focusing on. I've been focusing on, what would it take for our species to triumph? This is one of the questions that I have asked myself, and to me, it's a cultural and emotional response that it revolves around forgiving ourselves and each other and our species for what we've done to harm the planet.
Much to contemplate. Thank you, Alana.
Thanks, Lorna.
That was Alana Mitchell joining us from her book and stage tour in Northern Ontario. Well, our blogger John Stackhouse weighed in on this one. Find out why he's asking the Governor General to tea. All this after her science conference statements. You can find his commentary and much more on our website, contextwithlorna.com. Is our world in reverse? The recent spate of hurricanes, floods, forest fires. We're joined now by world-renowned climate scientist Katharine Hayhoe. Welcome back to the show, Katharine.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, we need some advice and counsel from you, a climate scientist. Is something up that are these hurricanes, are these, forest fires indicative of climate change?
We know that these types of crazy weather events are part of our normal natural life here on Earth. But we also know that the warmer our planet gets, the more it amplifies the risks associated with these previously entirely natural events. So, for example, hurricanes don't happen because of climate change, they just happen naturally. But in a warmer world, there's more energy available to those hurricanes from the warm ocean waters to ratchet up to category 3, 4, or even 5. There's also more water vapor available for them to sweep up and dump on us, increasing the rainfall rates associated with hurricanes. And while wildfires are typically ignited either by lightning or by humans, unfortunately, the area burned by wildfires has been increasing as our average conditions have gotten warmer and, in the West, drier too.
Okay, so Mother Nature is finding volatile conditions, right? Is it worse, though? Are these conditions worse than they have historically been?
It's kind of like when we are tired and run down, not sleeping or eating properly, and we pick up a bug or a virus. We might have gotten that bug or that virus anyways, but it's worse because of our rundown background conditions. In the same way, a hurricane, a wildfire, a heat wave, a drought, or a flood could just have occurred naturally. But when it occurs today, it's often stronger and lasts longer than it would have 50 or 100 years ago because of our changing climate.
Okay. People often call these incidents an act of God. How do you respond to that descriptive?
One of the most frequent arguments I hear is, us humans, we're so tiny, how could we affect something as big as our planet? And isn't God in control anyways? The reality is that there are almost 7.5 billion of us today. If you have ever flown over the Earth in an airplane and looked down, you can see the lights of human civilization spread all across the face of the planet. And we know when we look at the Bible that all the way from Genesis to Revelation, it talks about how God has actually given us humans responsibility over this planet that we live on. This planet is in our hands. It is up to us what we do with it. And it just makes sense to make sure that it offers a safe and secure home for us, for our children, and for everyone around the world.
Okay, so we have failed then to be a steward of what God has given us in the earth. Climate change is our fault.
We didn't know when we first started burning all this coal and gas and oil back in the Industrial Revolution 300 years or so ago, we didn't know that it would produce all of these heat-trapping gases that would wrap an extra blanket around the planet, causing the planet to warm. But we have known for over 100 years now already that that is the case, and it is happening. So today it's time to say, how could we get our energy from different ways that don't produce heat-trapping gases, like the wind, the sun, the tides, geothermal, even nuclear, ways that don't produce heat-trapping gases, but they still enable us to power our economy, and they enable developing countries to continue to develop. And the good news is this is already happening. India leads the world in the cheapest solar prices on record. China has more wind and solar energy installed than any other country in the world. Pay-as-you-go solar is revolutionizing areas of Africa where they have no electricity grid whatsoever. The world is changing, and today it's us who are on the verge of being left behind.
Okay, give us your top 3 ways that we should make a difference about the global warming that's going on. Ordinary mom and dad at home, what should we do?
Number 1, talk about it. Studies have shown that we don't talk about this, and so why would we even think it matters or that there's lots of cool things we can do to fix it if we don't talk about it? That's what I always do on my Facebook page, is I try to post things that people can use to talk about. The second thing we can do is we can step on the carbon scales ourselves. We can look for a carbon calculator online, and we can weigh our carbon footprint. Kind of like if you're going to lose weight, the first thing you do is you step on the scales. If we're going to lose carbon weight, step on the carbon scales. Google carbon calculator and enter your information about where you live, how much you drive, how much meat you eat, how you dry your clothes, and figure out where your carbon's coming from. And then a good carbon calculator will also give you ideas on how to reduce it. Number 3, tell our leaders, whether it's someone, whether it's our local councillor, man or woman, whether it's our MP or MPP, tell our leaders that you really care about this issue, because it doesn't matter where we are politically. A thermometer tells us the same number, whether we're, conservative, liberal, NDP, or green. But the reality is we need solutions that are consistent with the entire political spectrum. So talk to your city, talk to our province, talk to our federal leaders and say, hey, we support what you're doing. We like the action that's happening. We want more because we really want to fix this problem, and I'm behind you.
Okay, climate scientist Katharine Hayhoe in Texas. Thank you for joining us again. We always love having you on our show.
Thank you so much.
As we watch Mother Nature's wrath carve a path, it hasn't only been hurricanes this season. Droughts in Southern California have caused the worst forest fires in history.
Our house is gone, guys! Oh my God, our house is gone!
Just one distraught homeowner's reaction in Northern California, where so far 43 people lost their lives in this deadly blaze. More than 8,000 structures have burnt to the ground. Here in Canada, BC saw its largest wildfire in recorded history this summer that led to mass-scale evacuations and air quality advisories in several provinces. Meanwhile, floods have ravaged parts of South Asia. Bangladesh and India impacted the most. More than 1,200 people have died, and 1.8 million children are still out of school. In Mexico, a 7.1 magnitude earthquake took the lives of more than 216 people. Families have had to dig through the rubble to look for their loved ones. After the devastation of Hurricane Harvey and Irma, an update on recovery on the ground. We speak to John Mills, spokesperson from FEMA. That's coming up. And then a different storm of a different kind. More on the aftermath of our Governor General taking on the winds of faith in her remarks on science and care for our world. In the southern U.S. and Caribbean islands, a horrific hurricane season claimed the lives of more than 100 people and caused $300 billion damage. Following that story is our Sheldon Neal.
Streets turned into rivers. Families, houses, businesses left in ruins. Hurricane Harvey, a Category 4 storm, was first. It hit parts of South Texas and Louisiana with record rainfall of, get this, 27 trillion gallons of rain. That's enough water to fill all NFL and college football stadiums more than 100 times over. 82 people were reported dead. On its heels, Irma, a Category 5 hurricane that tore through the Caribbean. Some places left completely decimated, the majority of its infrastructure destroyed. Southern Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina were not spared. $200 billion estimated in damage. Outside of the Caribbean Sea and Gulf of Mexico, Irma at one point was the strongest hurricane the National Hurricane Center has ever recorded in the Atlantic Ocean. With an update on the recovery efforts after these two hurricanes is John Mills with the U.S. Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA. John, let's start with Hurricane Harvey. What's the latest update, the most important update on the Harvey recovery front?
Sheldon, thanks for having me. Disaster survivors are going through this every day of the week, and we always remember that. In terms of Hurricane Harvey and survivors from Hurricane Irma and Hurricane Maria, we're focusing on disaster survivors, in particular those who have lost their homes, their primary residence. We're encouraging them to register with FEMA for disaster assistance, and we've already approved millions and millions of dollars in disaster assistance for their needs not covered by insurance. We're trying to help people get a roof over their head, at least temporarily. We've accomplished that right now for most of those people, but some people are going to face challenging recoveries because a lot of people are still in hotels.
And a part of that challenge, a month after, about 60,000 Texans were still displaced. Where are those numbers now?
At the peak, about 63,000 Texans were in hotels at FEMA expense. That number is down, and it's still going down, but unfortunately, but 50,000 are still in hotels. The good news part of that is at least they have a roof over their head. But because that storm was so big, Hurricane Harvey, so many homes were destroyed, there will be some long-term housing challenges. So we're looking at a wide variety of options. About $7 billion has already been provided in Texas so far. A lot of that money is for rental assistance, so people can rent a place to live temporarily, but we're looking at a wide variety of potential housing options.
Let's turn briefly to Hurricane Irma now. What does recovery look like in the different areas of southern Florida?
Hurricane Irma, another huge storm, so you have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people affected by that. FEMA's provided more than $2 billion so far. We're seeing hundreds of millions of dollars in disaster loans also provided here, and some housing challenges. The good news is power is back on. A lot of businesses are back up and running. Schools are open again. So there is a lot of recovery progress, but we're still very focused on survivors who need help the most.
Interestingly, the Florida Keys is a major tourist economy point, pumping money back into the area. Again, briefly, how are the local businesses, owners recovering there?
Several weeks ago, the Florida Keys, in particular Key West, declared they're open for business again. And you can see it through the Keys. A lot of those businesses are back open, along with much of South Florida, for the winter tourism season. So they're happy about that. At the same time, we're very mindful of the fact that a lot of people are not fully back on their feet right now. They've lost their homes. We're providing a lot of temporary housing solutions. We're helping people get into hotels. We've provided millions of dollars in rental assistance, and we're also looking at bringing in temporary housing in some of the hardest hit areas in the Keys.
John, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
That was John Mills with FEMA External Affairs. He joined me from Miami.
Coming soon to Context, a deeper look into the social implications of income disparity. We'll look at solutions to fight economic inequality and the growing divide between wealthy and poor Canadians. Context, taking you beyond the headlines.
All right, now the very personal impact of what happens when there's been destruction caused by incredible hurricanes. Cheryl Weber brings us this back from Puerto Rico.
I'm here in Bayamon, about 20 minutes outside the capital, San Juan of Puerto Rico. It's been about 5 weeks since Hurricane Maria hit this island with nearly Category 5 hurricane force. We came to this neighborhood today. We were literally the first people to show up with aid that they have seen.
The houses, they are not constructed to handle 200 miles per hour winds. And that what happened with this hurricane. Like, everybody lost their houses, their roofs are gone. So they're just surviving, no water, no electricity, no medical services. These people lost everything. They are waiting for FEMA, they're waiting for government help, and nobody has gone over there. We need to move as citizens, because if we don't do it, I don't think nobody's gonna get there.
With all that you've seen across Puerto Rico in the wake of Hurricane Maria, do you see any signs that God is at work?
The perfect story is myself. I was raised in church. I was a youth leader. I play instruments, guitar, piano, bass. I lost my faith studying medicine. I don't know where it went until this day. Now I'm reconnecting with God right now, thanks to the hurricane. So that's my story. There's a lot of stories like mine. What else can I say?
What was it about the hurricane that made you find God again?
All the help that's getting to me. Nobody knows me. I'm a complete stranger to the world, and I'm getting so much support from strangers, churches. It's heavy. It's a heavy feeling, but it's great. It's great. It's great. Yeah, but I'll say that. I'm a complete stranger, and these people have trusted me from Indiana, from New York, from San Francisco, from Florida, Michigan, Chicago, everywhere. I'm thankful.
We are dying, and you are killing us with the inefficiency and the bureaucracy.
So this is her house. She lost completely the roof, lost everything in it, furniture, fridge, and everything.
Wow. So she has no electricity, no running water, and she's only seen the government 2 days ago, and that was just for the tarp, so no other help in this whole month. Does she feel that the aid has been coming quickly enough?
¿Crees que la ayuda ha llegado rápido a Puerto Rico?
Bueno, ya va un mes.
She said that it could be faster because it's already been 1 month.
So as a person who believes in God, how does her faith get her through a time where she loses everything like this?
Él es el que nos mantiene en pie para poder sobrellevar esto.
So she said that I got emotional too. She said that without God in her heart, she didn't know how to actually be able to survive this, because she doesn't know how to get up every morning to fight and see her house like this, and gotta take her son to school, and God's been everything to her.
Confiando en sus promesas.
She said trusting His promises.
Creyendo, ¿verdad?, que Él nos va a proveer y vamos a seguir.
Believing that He's faithful, then He's gonna provide. She's gonna keep going.
God, I thank you for Lizzie, and that you are. Many people here are concerned that the pace of aid has been too slow. They are frustrated. They didn't think it would take this long. But underneath it all is this determination that they will persevere and restore this island to the beautiful nation it once was. For context, I'm Cheryl Weber in Puerto Rico.
That we are still debating and still questioning whether life was a divine intervention or whether it was coming out of a natural process, let alone, oh my goodness, lo and behold, random.
Well, each Governor General has their own views, and Ms. Payette's remarks caused us to recall what her predecessor, Governor General David Johnson, told Context about God.
I pray every day. I'm very conscious that faith is very much a part of one's being, one's soul, and I simply think, especially the Christian religion, whose basis is love, is something that grounds us and permits us to carry out our activities day to day with some kind of frame of reference or moral compass.
Well, with the challenges we heard in today's news, from the horror in Texas to the victims of storm-ravaged communities, we do need to be grounded in a framework of God's love. So let's get out there and let's use our moral compass for sharing God's love in a hurting world. We've left much more on this on our website. I'm Lorna Duick, and for all of us at Context, thank you for watching.